the fourth gift, obedience. Well, we've sang about the first three gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Well, the fourth gift is obedience. They had come because they saw the star, because they understood that there was a king to be born. And obedience, coming to seek God, in this case, is a love story of the highest order. It's a love story about men who somehow learned the information about a new king to be born to the Jews. And we have no information on how they knew or how they got this knowledge. We don't know how many magi how they got together in their own land, how many of them there were, why this became so important that they had to put their lives on hold to come, and how much of their personal fortune they spent to come. We do know, though, that because the text says it was love, because the text says they rejoiced with exceeding great joy when the star showed them, so they could be sure that they were at the exact right house. There's maybe 100, 200 houses in Bethlehem. How did they know? They knew exactly because the star showed them. Well, there's a reason why the church is called the bride of Christ. It's because God chose to use the story of love between a man and a woman to illustrate love. We know that he knew that this kind of love, even though it wasn't perfect, was as close a way to show his love for us. With that in mind, let me tell you a love story. A woman of rare beauty from the south of Italy, she could have had any man she wanted. Every man in the village came to her and vowed their love, except one man. He was the tailor in the village. He was a young man who had done quite well with tailoring, and he made a nice living for himself. So he was, but the problem was, he hadn't come and vowed his love to her, and she came to him to add to her entourage of men who wanted her, and she asked him to the fair. And he said, I would be happy to take you to the fair. And they went to the fair, but she met someone there who had come from away. He was a wine merchant, and he asked for her hand in marriage, and in 3 or 4 weeks, they were married. Now, the tailor came to the family and said, I'd like to make the wedding gown for you. And the family was very happy because they were a poor family, and a wedding gown was an expense that they could not well afford. And he went to Naples and got the very best fabric, the very best to make this gown. And she came every day with a chaperone, and he worked on the gown. He knelt at her feet, he hemmed it, he did all of this. And the wedding day came, and she couldn't thank him because he didn't come to the wedding. For some mysterious reason, he had to be away. And they left for America right after the wedding. 15 years passed. He did well for a while, her husband, and they had 2 children, and then he fell on hard times, and he died. It's 15 years later. And in the Catholic Church, there's an important first communion for a woman, for a young girl, and she had to have a pretty dress, but they couldn't afford a pretty dress. And the mother remembered the wonderful wedding dress, and she said, I can shorten it and make it smaller, and it'll fit her, and she'll have a wonderful dress. And she started taking out the hem, and she found a note in the hem from the tailor, I will always love you. And so she wrote him a letter to thank him for the wedding dress, which she had failed to thank him for, and for all he had done for her and all he thought of her that she didn't deserve, because she hadn't spent any time with him. And she didn't tell him anything about her situation except that her husband had died. And weeks went by and she had no answer from him, but she didn't expect an answer because it had 15 years had passed. Was he married? Was he still alive? The Second World War had happened during this 15-year period, and Italy was part of that war. And a couple weeks after, she came home to find him standing at the door. He had left everything. He'd come into, his love was such that he had come ready to marry her. He'd sold his business and everything, and he'd come to stay in that country. He didn't say, I'm going to take you back. I'm going to start a new business here. So I thought that was a very nice love story. Adam and Eve is a kind of a love story too, in that a love story with God. See, he had one request of Adam and Eve, a request that was fulfilled every day. Every day you are not to eat of this tree, and every day you do that, you prove to me that you love me. Well, we know what happened. They ate of the tree, and they were saying to God, well, I don't know if I love you as much as I love myself. Well, this was God's way of asking these people, do you love me? And each of the actors in this story of the Magi had an opportunity to prove their love for God. The Magi, the religious leaders, and Herod. And we're going to look at how well they did. Number one is they came straight away. In Matthew 1 and 2, it says that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and the Magi came, and they said, where is the King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east, and we've come to see him, to worship him. Now, these men had to figure it out first. Why was this star there? What did it mean? And these men weren't worshippers of God, but they could not dismiss the fact that a God who would put a star in the sky for a newborn child was not a God to be ignored. It was also important to them to put their lives on hold and come this long distance with gifts. And something else, we sang a song, We Three Kings, but it wasn't three kings, and it wasn't three. This was a lot more. Three men on camels don't get an immediate chance to see the king. They don't upset the entire city. This was an amazing event. They were coming, a major thing. And they were treated accordingly. Now, number 2 is, what's troubling you? Verse 3 to 6, the king heard this, and he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And then he asked where the Messiah was going to be born, and they said in Bethlehem of Judea. Now, it's easy to figure out why Herod was troubled, because he was worried about competition. He was always worried about competition. He was really worried about competition. There's Herod worried about his wives. He worried about his sons. He had many of his wives put to death. He had many of his sons put to death. He worried about them. Are you doing something that Caesar Augustus said this about Herod? I would rather be Herod's pig than his son. It's safer. And he might also have been worried about the fact that if the common people found the Messiah, they might lead to rebellion. He liked the status quo. Now, it's easy to figure out why he was troubled, but why was all of Jerusalem troubled? And that would be that's a harder thing to figure out. Maybe they were troubled because if the Messiah is a baby is easy to get rid of. A baby is easy to deal with, but they might have preferred a baby who grew up to become a powerful man who could become the Messiah, who could redeem Israel. But as it was, it still caused a lot of trouble if it upset the whole city. Now, the religious leaders were really a political force in the country, and they were very shrewd, and this had a chance to upset their apple cart, so that's why maybe they were worried. Number 3 is the plot of unsuspecting worshipers. The plot on unsuspecting worshipers. Herod said this in verse 7 and 8. Then Herod secretly called the Magi and determined from them the exact time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child, and when you have found him, report to me, so that I too may come and worship him also." Well, see, Herod played his hand, and he played it secretly because everyone in Jerusalem knew what he did. He was not a man to go worship another king who was going to usurp his authority. So he had to do this, he had to go secretly. Now, I think the Magi would have been completely caught off guard. They would not suspect him because they came all this distance to worship God, the newborn king. They came all this way, and they were basically looking through rose-colored glasses. And they would assume that everybody would be the same, except more so because this was their king. It was Jerusalem, the king of Israel. Well, Herod also wanted to know the age so he could know how hard this new threat would be to deal with. Number 4 is the star is back and really fine-tuned. If you read in verse 11, it says, "On hearing this, the king, they went their way, and the star which they'd seen in the east went on before them until it came and stood over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And coming into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell to the ground and worshipped him. Then opening their presents, they offered him the gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh." This is what I was thinking their words would be. We're so close now, it's 5 miles, and the star is going to even shine on the very house. Why did we worry? God wants us to find this king so bad that he made it impossible for us to fail. We're here now. Knock on the door. We can't be the wrong place. And God will be okay with this, even if we have to get him up in the middle of the night. And besides, I can't wait. I'm so excited. And it's a good thing they got them up in the middle of the night, because if they hadn't said, "Well, this is the house for sure, it's right here, the star is shining on it, we can't be anyplace else. Well, let's go back, because to honor the king, we don't want to wake him up in the middle of the night. We'll come back." And if they'd gone back to Jerusalem, they would have told Herod, and that would have changed the entire story. We often think that sin is something that you do something wrong, something evil, something selfish, some mean thing. And it's true. You know what? Sin is like Cain when God said to Abel, God said to Cain, "Sin is at the door and it wants you." And then he went out and killed his brother Abel. Sin is like when David saw Bathsheba, and he didn't just stop at seeing her, he called her. And then he did whatever he did with her, and then eventually it came to the fact that Bathsheba's husband was killed. All of that is sin, but that's not the only thing that sin is. Sin is sometimes it's doing good. Sin is sometimes good, but not the best. Sometimes we can choose something good. In the case of the rulers of the law, they had a choice to be upset about the Magi coming instead of being overjoyed, and they chose the good of a safe choice because they knew Herod. It was a good thing not to upset Herod, right? But it wasn't the best thing. They could have chosen the best thing and ignored the risks and followed the Magi and seen Jesus as a baby. They could have been the one that answered the questions. Remember when Jesus was on his ministry and somebody asked, isn't Jesus supposed to be, isn't the Messiah, it can't be Jesus because he's from Nazareth. The Messiah was supposed to be from Bethlehem. And these men who followed the Magi could have said, yes, it is Jesus. We were there with the Magi, and we researched and we talked to the shepherds who came the very night that Jesus was born. We know all of this. It's true. We witnessed the miracle, what happened when Herod sent his soldiers to kill Jesus. We saw it all. And we chose because we chose the best thing instead of the good thing. And Jesus is the Messiah, and now it's 30 years later, and we wish we were younger so that we could travel around with him and see everything that God is doing, the miracles that God is doing through him. Now, as you know, that last part I just all made up because they chose the good thing. That's not the story, because they chose the good thing and not the best thing. Now, this is a love story. We know that it's a love story because it includes the words, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. Well, now some people make an argument that on the surface seems reasonable. They say that because God knows everything, everything is preordained, and why should God be able to be mad? Why would God be mad at anyone who makes the choice? He preordained it. But that's not the case. You know that we know things about people, even though we're not all-knowing, as God is. He's all-knowing, but we still know things about people. If I said to a group of people, invited them to my house and said, we have two choices of food. I know which one you're going to pick, because I just know. We have pizza, or we have freshly killed rats. Obviously, I can say, I know which one you're going to pick. Everybody picks pizza, right? Now, we need to choose the best. It's a free choice. God gives us free will. We need to choose the best like Adam and Eve had a chance to choose the best. We need to love Jesus instead of the sin of choosing something that's just good. There was a Vietnamese film a couple of years ago, and it was placed in time in 1975 in the second when the war in South and North Vietnam was just ending, and the U.S. left. And it's about a man and a woman. Well, the woman, she had no other choice, or she seemed to have no other choice because of the political and everything going on. She became a prostitute. And this man, who was the hero of the movie, with her, loved her. But he was poor and couldn't do anything. And he come into some money. He won a bunch of money. And see, what happened with her, of course, as a prostitute, she was brought to fancy hotels. And when all of that was done, she was sent away. And she wanted so badly to stay in these hotels because she felt that it would be like a normal person. And so when he got this money, he went to the fanciest motel, he rented the fanciest room, and he paid for a night of her service. And you obviously are filling in the blanks, but that's not what happened. He said, all I want to do is I want to watch you go to sleep, and then I'll leave. And so that's what he did. When she woke up in the morning, it was her room, it was for her to enjoy. And what happened is, it changed her. She could no longer be a prostitute. She had to find another way. See, he loved her enough to give her an opportunity to choose something different. And this was what what he did so she could choose. Well, Jesus is like that. He gives us choices. We can choose good things or bad things, but all of them are sinful if they are not choosing Jesus and his plan for our lives. He came and he loves us, and he spent everything he had, including his life, to give us a chance to choose the best, his salvation instead of something less. The devil gives us lots of choices, good opportunity, good choices. And here the Magi, all these characters got to choose. King Herod chose evil. The Magi chose the best. And the religious leaders just chose something good. We want our actions to mirror the actions of the Magi. We want to worship the King, to know it's him we chose, and to bring back that idea of a man and a woman in love, forsaking all others. We forsake all others to love God, no matter what the cost.